Hi, everybody. Let's talk about metabolism and nutrition. This is chapter 24 in your current textbook. Pardon me as I get this moving the way I want it to. There we go. So, you realize, of course, that you have to eat food in order to survive. But have you ever really given any thought to how the cheeseburger you had for lunch became something that our cells could actually use? That brings us to the topic of metabolism, which really has to do with chemical reactions that occur in the body. And we're talking about chemical reactions that have to take that cheeseburger and convert it into something the cells can use, as well as the reactions the cells then use to take advantage of the nutrients obtained from the cheeseburger. So, metabolism is defined as the conversion of energy in food to available cellular energy. So then consider the conversion of food to the building blocks that we need to make the proteins, lipids, nucleic acids, etc., that the body actually needs at the moment. And then it also includes the elimination of waste. So the summary of this definition of metabolism is that it is the sum of all the chemical reactions that occur in the body. So what are these chemical reactions? There are two types of metabolic reactions, and they're referred to as catabolic and anabolic. The catabolic reactions involve the breakdown reactions. This allows cells to capture energy and convert it into ATP, which is the usable form of energy for our cells. Generally speaking, these reactions release energy because they involve the breaking of bonds. So when we take larger molecules and break them down into smaller subunits, we do that by breaking the bonds that were holding them together. There was energy in those bonds, so when we break them, we release the energy. Now, the body captures this released energy and then converts that into ATP. Some of this energy is actually lost and it's given off as heat by these reactions. The cells can also release energy later by breaking bonds between second and third phosphate groups with ATP. And so we have this constant recycling of ATP to ADP and then back again. So ATP, as a reminder, is adenosine triphosphate, meaning that there are three phosphate groups on this molecule. And you can see that in the image really clearly in the first one, kind of on your left there with the orange circles. When we break one of those bonds, we release a phosphate group, and we then have what's left over is ADP, adenosine diphosphate. And again, we continually recycle these molecules as needed. So when we think about food as energy sources to make ATP, glucose is the most common of these energy sources. If we consume more than we need, the excess will be stored as glycogen, or we can convert it to triglycerides. We can use other molecules as well, such as dietary lipids or fats, to make ATP. We can also use amino acids from proteins as necessary. That's why sometimes when you see people who are starving and they have muscle wasting, it's because we're taking protein from the muscles to make energy to keep the body alive. Now, nucleic acids, meaning DNA and RNA, are typically used to create new nucleic acid molecules, not really used to produce ATP. But I put this in here because ATP is a compound also consisting of components you see in the nucleic acids, so it is technically grouped in as a nucleic acid, and ATP is an energy source. Now, the other category of reactions are the anabolic reactions. So smaller molecules now are joined to form the larger molecules that we need at that time. This uses energy and the molecules that were formed and or released by the catabolic reactions. So typically, these reactions use energy. Again, we're joining smaller molecules to make larger ones. Mono means one and saccharide means sugar. So monosaccharides are joined together to form polysaccharides. Poly means many. Again, saccharide means sugar. Fatty acids are joined to form triglycerides, amino acids to form proteins, and then nucleotides to form nucleic acids. And again, to form new molecules, we're making bonds, so we're putting energy into the bonds to hold these things together. New molecules that are formed can allow for growth and repair of tissues, as well as communication. Now, this is looking at a cell and ATP, and we have a process that does all of this for us. So when a cell needs to use energy for a process, it can break down ATP in order to do so. So we have these processes called glycolysis and fermentation that are occurring in the cytoplasm of the cell in order for us to be able to move forward with these energy reactions. Again, ATP is the form of cellular energy that we can utilize. So sometimes people refer to it as the currency of the cell. When cells require energy for a metabolic process, they'll break off a phosphate group from ATP, giving you the ADP and the phosphate group I mentioned earlier. That energy that's released when the bond is broken then fuels cellular work. And so the graphic here is showing you how we recycle ATP and ADP. Now, there are enzymes involved in these reactions, and enzymes are simply biological catalysts. What that means is they aid in the reaction occurring at a pace that is beneficial to the cell, but the enzyme itself does not participate in the reaction. So let me be clear that these are reactions that would occur anyway, but they might not occur as quickly as we need them to. So the enzyme as a catalyst will increase the rate at which the chemical reaction occurs, but again is not consumed itself in the reaction. Enzymes usually are proteins. Cofactors are non-protein molecules that bind to the enzymes and actually enable their activity. Cofactors are usually vitamins and minerals. Now, when we look at these reactions from a chemistry standpoint, there's a situation where electrons are lost from a molecule, and we call that oxidation in chemistry. When the opposite happens, electrons are gained, we call that a reduction reaction. When we look at these together, we call them redox reactions. And we do that because they actually do tend to occur coupled together. So where you'll have reduction on one side of the chemical equation and oxidation on the other side of the balanced chemical equation. Again, with cofactors, these are not proteins typically. They'll bind to the proteins that are enzymes to help them do their job. Again, usually these are vitamins and minerals. So most of the vitamins and minerals that we need actually act as cofactors for our enzymes. So this is just a little bit to show you what oxidation and reduction kind of looks like. So in A, oxidation reactions are those in which an electron is removed from a molecule. And then a reduction reaction is where an electron has been added to a molecule. And again, these are happening coupled together, so it's almost simultaneously. One molecule will be oxidized while the other is reduced because the electron has to go somewhere. In the B part of the graphic at the bottom, the electron and those reactions are obtained from hydrogen. That means that hydrogen becomes an ion once its electron is removed, and essentially The hydrogen is just a proton. So it's positively charged and then no longer balanced out by the negative electron. Many food molecules are oxidized in order for us to get ATP, and then the electrons that are lost are used to reduce what are called electron carriers. So the electron is given up and it has to go somewhere, and it goes to another molecule that can handle it and move the electron where we need it to go. So common electron carriers are NAD and FAD, and those are the oxidized forms. When they're reduced, they're NADH and FADH too. So these coenzymes, NAD and FAD, accept energy and an electron as nearby molecules are catabolized or broken down. The electrons draw hydrogen ions then towards these molecules. So I don't have this in display mode, so you're actually seeing the answers as I'm giving you the question. And so think of catabolic and anabolic reactions that occur in the body, and what would be examples of those? Well, breaking down glucose, lipids, etc. And anabolic would be making ATP, making new proteins, and so on. And then I'll put this in display mode for you. So oxidation reactions occur when electrons are lost. When you take in fewer calories through food than your body needs, your body has to find the means of obtaining energy. This is commonly accomplished by decomposing fat molecules. So, which of the following types of reactions best describes that process? Catabolic, because we're breaking down fat. And then cofactors are substances that bind to enzymes and enable their activity. A little bit about macronutrients. Nutrients that we need or use in the largest amounts are called macro because that's big, macronutrients. So this includes proteins, lipids, the nucleic acids, as well as carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are the main source of energy for making ATP. All of them are sugars or are built by adding sugar molecules together. And I mentioned this before with glucose, but another sugar is fructose, fruit sugar. So these are monosaccharides, single sugars. Starch, glycogen, and cellulose are considered polysaccharides because they're made up of many sugar molecules added together. Starch and glycogen serve as energy storage, and the cellulose is the structural carb that you see actually in plants so that plants can grow tall. It gives them some structure and strength so that they can have stalks, if you will. Now, that's going to lead us into the next part of this chapter, which has to do with cellular respiration. And cellular respiration is the process that's breaking down the monosaccharides, again, usually glucose, to release that energy. And then what happens? How do we get that? And how much energy do we get? And so I think what we're going to do is stop right here so that we can make cellular respiration the next video. So I am going to stop sharing and stop recording, and I will